You know, I was thinking the other day about a question a friend asked me once. Just out of the blue, what actually destroys a nation?
Hmm. Interesting question. What did you say?
Well, my answer surprised them, I think. I said the idea of the nation itself.
Wow, okay. That definitely cuts against the grain, doesn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, most people see the nation as, well, as a source of pride, identity, strength.
Exactly. And that's the paradox, right? That's what we really want to dig into today. Why can this idea, this thing that feels so fundamental and often so positive, also be, well, destructive?
So the mission is to unpack that. What even is a nation? How did we get this idea? What has it actually given us?
And crucially, what has it cost us? What has it taken away?
And we'll be looking at this from, different angles. History, definitely.
Mm.
Philosophy, political ideas.
And real world stuff, too. Empires, global politics, right up to today.
Right. The goal is that by the end, that initial answer you gave your friend, it'll make a lot more sense.
Yeah, hopefully you'll see why this idea of the nation could be seen as maybe our greatest creation, but also maybe our most dangerous illusion.
But hang on, before we jump into the deep history and all that,
Mm.
we probably need to get our terms straight.
Good point, because we throw around words like nation, state, country all the time.
Yeah, like they're synonyms.
But they're not, really. And those differences, they actually matter a lot for this whole discussion.
Okay, so let's start with nation. What are we talking about there? It's primarily a community, right? People who feel they share something deep.
Like a common identity.
Exactly. Could be language, culture, maybe a shared history, traditions, sometimes religion. It's that feeling of, it's not really about legal borders, it's about belonging. It's the story they share.
Okay, so if nation is the people and their shared identity, what's the state?
The state is more the political machinery. It's the organized authority that governs a specific territory.
So laws, government, police, army.
Precisely. The whole system. The modern definition usually includes, having a population, a defined territory, a government, and importantly, the capacity to interact with other states. It's the legal entity.
Right.
And it's funny, the word state itself originally just meant the condition of a place, like the state of the rivers and mountains.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, only later did it get attached to the political power governing that place.
Okay, nation is identity, state is government. What about country? That seems simpler.
Usually, yeah. Country tends to refer more to the physical land, the geography itself. You can point to it on a map.
So a country could exist geographically even if it doesn't have its own independent government or even a single unified people living there.
Potentially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick recap. Nations, the people, the shared S. State, the governing power. Country, the land itself.
Got it. But, and this is the key part, I guess, these three don't always match up perfectly, do they?
Not at all. That's where it gets complicated and often tense. You could definitely have a nation without a state.
Like people with a strong shared identity, but no internationally recognized independent territory.
Exactly. Think of the Kurds, for example. A large group with a distinct culture, language, history, but spread across several states.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Syria, or the Palestinians.
Right. And what about the other way around? Can you have one state with many nations inside it?
Absolutely. India is a classic example. One single state, one country on the map, but home to an incredible diversity of languages, cultures, distinct groups. You could argue many nations within one state boundary.
And then sometimes they do align pretty closely.
Yes, though it's maybe rarer than we think.
Mm-hmm.
Places like Japan or Iceland are often cited. Relatively homogeneous populations, shared culture, language, all within one state. Nation and state are almost the same thing there.
Okay, so understanding this potential mismatch or tension between the nation, the people's identity, and the state, the government's power, is really important.
It's crucial because so many conflicts, historical and current, really boils down to that tension. It's right at the heart of the big question we started with.
Okay, that makes sense. So now that we have a clearer picture of what we mean by nation, how did this idea even come about? It wasn't always like this, was it?
Oh, definitely not. If you go way back, for most of human history, identity was much more local.
Like your family, your tribe, your village.
Exactly. Or maybe loyalty to a particular ruler, a king, an emperor, or to a city, like in ancient Greece, you were Athenian or Spartan first.
Right, or a subject of the Roman Empire, maybe?
Precisely. You were a subject, not really a member of a nation in the way we think of it now.
So what held bigger groups together beyond just a local area?
Well, for a very long time, religion played a huge role. Think about Christendom in medieval Europe.
A sort of shared Christian identity across different kingdoms.
Right. Or the Ummah in the Islamic world, that sense of a global community of faith connecting diverse peoples. These were powerful, but they were spiritual maps, not national ones.
So when did things start to shift towards, well, towards the modern state and then the nation?
You start seeing big changes in Europe around the 16th, 17th centuries. Thinkers like Hobbes and Locke start grappling with ideas about sovereignty, power, consent.
Leviathan, natural rights,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
exactly. And then you have events like the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. That was really significant because it kind of formalized the idea of sovereign territories. States recognizing each other's right to exist, more or less. It laid the groundwork for the modern state system. Still not quite nations yet, but getting closer.
Okay, so the state structure is emerging. When do the people really enter the picture as the basis for the nation?
That's where the Enlightenment in the 18th century becomes absolutely pivotal. Thinkers like Rousseau talking about the general will.
The idea that authority comes from the people themselves, not from God or a king.
Precisely. And then bang, the revolutions. The American Revolution, setting up a government based on the consent of the governed.
And then the French Revolution, even more dramatically.
Hugely dramatic. Suddenly, sovereignty wasn't just abstractly the people, it was la patrie, the fatherland. People were fighting and dying for the nation. That was a massive psychological shift.
So the political idea is there. What about the emotional side, the cultural identity part?
That really explodes in the late 18th and especially the 19th century with romantic nationalism. This is where you get figures like Herder in Germany talking about the Volksgeist.
The unique spirit of a people found in their language and folk tales.
Exactly. Or Fichte calling for national education. Mazzini in Italy linking nationalism directly with the fight for liberty and unification. This is when people started actively collecting folk stories, like the Grimm brothers.
Or reviving epic poems like the Kalevala in Finland, creating national histories.
Yes, all to build that sense of shared, unique identity. And this fueled massive political changes, the unification of Italy and Germany, independence movements for Poles, Hungarians, Greeks. The desire for a nation-state became incredibly powerful.
And then technology and society changed things again in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution.
Big time. Think about mass literacy, cheap newspapers. Suddenly, millions of people are reading the same news, having the same conversations, even if they live hundreds of miles apart.
Creating a shared public sphere.
Right. And mass schooling starts standardizing language, teaching everyone the same national history. Think of France deliberately teaching French and French history to kids from Brittany to Provence.
And things like railways, conscription, physically bringing people together.
Exactly, binding them into this larger ooze. And scholars have given us useful ways to think about this. Benedict Anderson's imagined communities is a key one.
The idea that print media, maps, censuses helped people imagine themselves as part of this vast community, even though they'd never meet most of its members.
Precisely. And Ernest Gellner argued that industrial society needed cultural sameness, standardization for efficiency, and the nation provided that. Eric Hobsbawm pointed out how states often deliberately invented traditions to make these relatively new nations feel ancient and timeless.
So this idea, born mostly in Europe, it then spreads
all over the world. After World War I, Woodrow Wilson's ideas about self-determination gave it a huge boost.
People should choose their own destiny.
Right. And then after World War II, you see that massive wave of decolonization across Asia and Africa, India, Indonesia, Ghana, Algeria, Vietnam. All these new nation states emerging, fueled by nationalist movements.
But we should remember, this force that can liberate can also Exclude and oppress.
Absolutely. It's always had that double edge. As
Yeah.
the French thinker Renan said back in the 19th century, a nation isn't just shared memories, it's also a daily plebiscite, a daily choice to continue living together.
And Anderson's point holds true millions imagining this big bond.
So, yeah, the nation, it's not some eternal thing. It's a modern invention, really,
Yeah.
built with ideas, media, schools, stories. United strangers gave them immense power.
But it also set the stage for terrible conflicts, which brings us to weighing the good and the bad, doesn't it? The advantages versus the dangers.
Right. Let's start with the advantages, because despite the dangers we hinted at, the idea of the nation has done incredible things for humanity.
Like what? What's the big positive contribution?
Well, maybe the most fundamental thing is solidarity. It allows huge groups of people, millions, to feel connected, to feel they belong together.
That imagined community idea again. Before nations' loyalty was mostly local, right?
Exactly. Your village, maybe your region, your feudal lord. The nation created a framework for empathy and cooperation on a scale never seen before.
And that cooperation, it allows for big projects, development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about building nationwide infrastructure, railways, schools, public health systems. When people feel part of a shared national project, they're more willing to contribute, to pay taxes, to work for something bigger than themselves.
Can you give examples?
Well, think about the rapid industrialization of Germany after unification in the 19th century, or the Meiji Restoration in Japan, a huge modernization drive fueled by national ambition. That shared identity was a powerful engine.
Okay, so large-scale cooperation. What else?
Protecting culture and language. This is huge. For centuries, smaller cultures were always at risk of being swallowed up by big empires.
Assimilated, basically.
Right. But national movements often focused explicitly on reviving, standardizing, and promoting their own language and traditions. Think about Italian, Hindi, Finnish. These languages were actively cultivated as part of building the nation. Poets and writers often became national heroes.
So it preserves diversity in a way.
It can, yes,
Yeah.
by giving distinct cultures a political framework to defend themselves.
What about the political side? Self-governance.
That's another massive one. Nationhood became the rallying cry for throwing off colonial rule or escaping tyranny. It provided the justification, the legitimacy, for people to demand their own state.
Like India's independence movement,
Yeah.
bringing together so many diverse groups against the British.
Exactly. Or the unification of Italy and Germany, smaller states joining together based on a shared national identity to form a stronger whole.
And we saw this across Africa and Asia too, right?
Absolutely. Ghana, Algeria, Vietnam, the list goes on. Nationalism was the ideology of liberation for millions.
So at its best, the nation offers this sense of belonging, empowers large-scale projects, protects unique cultures, and justifies self-rule. It's like a promise.
Yeah, a promise of belonging to something bigger, something that's yours to build and protect.
And that promise has undeniably shaped the modern world.
No question about it.
Okay, so those are some powerful positives. But we started this whole thing with the idea that the nation can also destroy. Let's turn to that darker side now. Where does it go wrong?
It often starts when that sense of us, that national pride, curdles into defining yourself against others.
You always need to them.
Sadly, too often, yes. It can easily slip into exclusion, mistrust of foreigners, xenophobia, and even racism. History is littered with examples of nations justifying terrible acts by dehumanizing those outside the national group.
And the borders themselves, they can cause harm.
Definitely. National borders are often drawn arbitrarily, right through the middle of existing communities that have lived together for centuries.
We mentioned the Kurds earlier, spread across multiple countries.
Right, or the Pashtuns divided by the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. A line on a map, often drawn by colonial powers with little regard for the people living there, becomes this hard barrier, dividing families, cultures, economies. A wall in the heart, as you said.
And the most extreme danger, war.
Undeniably. Nationalism was a major, if not the major, driver of the catastrophic wars of the 20th century. World War I and World War II were fueled by competing national ambitions, rivalries, and ideologies of national superiority. Millions died because of conflicts between nations.
And sometimes that drive for national unity turns inwards, against diversity within the nation.
Yes, tragically. States trying to forge a single national identity can end up suppressing minority languages, banning regional cultures, trying to force everyone into one mold.
We saw the horrific consequences of that in places like the former Yugoslavia in the 90s.
Exactly, or the Rwandan genocide, ethnic nationalism taken to its most horrifying extreme.
It's sobering that even movements for national liberation can lead to terrible outcomes. You mentioned the partition of India earlier.
Right, independence achieved, but at the cost of immense violence and displacement as new national lines were drawn.
It really makes you understand those warnings from thinkers like Tagore, a cruel epidemic of evil, or Einstein calling nationalism an infantile disease.
They saw the danger clearly. And this brings us right back to your opening point, how the idea itself can be destructive.
Because when it becomes about dominance, about being number one at all costs, it poisons everything.
It does. It starts by harming others, but eventually that kind of aggressive, exclusionary nationalism can undermine the nation itself. It breeds internal division, prevents necessary cooperation, blinds the nation to its own problems.
Like empires collapsing under their own weight and pride.
History suggests that's often the pattern. When a nation believes its own myth of inherent greatness too much, it loses touch with reality. It resists change, ignores warnings, and can't adapt. It becomes brittle.
So maybe the real danger isn't the nation itself, but nationalism taken to an extreme. The belief that your nation is inherently superior and destined to dominate.
I think that's a huge part of it. That kind of thinking prevents the very global cooperation we increasingly need to survive.
Which makes you wonder, maybe a little less rigid nationhood, a bit more focus on shared humanity, might actually be better for everyone's long-term survival.
It's a thought worth holding on to.
So where does that leave us now, here in the 21st century? The nation is still obviously a huge force, but the world feels different, more connected.
Absolutely. Globalization is the big factor, isn't it? Fast travel, instant communication, interconnected economies. It inevitably challenges the idea of self-contained nations.
And yet, the paradox is nationalism hasn't just faded away. In some ways, it feels like it's making a comeback.
It's a real tension. You see both forces at play. On one side, you have things like the European Union, the UN attempts at transnational cooperation.
Pooling sovereignty to deal with shared problems.
Right. But then you also see these strong nationalist resurgences, Brexit, America First, similar movements in many other countries, a real pushback towards prioritizing the nation state above all else.
It's that constant pull, isn't it? Belonging to your tribe versus belonging to the world.
Exactly. And for some groups, the struggle isn't about choosing between nationalism and globalism. It's about achieving nationhood in the first place.
The stateless nations we talked about?
Yes, the Palestinians, Kurds, Tibetans, others. For them, the dream of having their own recognized nation state remains incredibly powerful and relevant.
And then you have countries that are, by their nature, deeply diverse, like Canada, India, South Africa.
Where national identity isn't about everyone being the same, but about managing or even celebrating that mix of cultures, languages, religions within one state framework.
Which sounds good, but as you said, it's a tricky balance. Too much pressure for unity can crush that diversity.
It certainly can. It requires constant negotiation and respect for difference.
And now there's this whole other layer, digital communities.
Yeah, this is fascinating. People forming strong identities in communities online around games, activism, hobbies that transcend physical borders entirely.
Does that change the meaning of belonging if your strongest community isn't tied to where you live?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Will identity remain fundamentally tied to land and state? Or are we seeing the emergence of new kinds of nations online?
So it really is a paradox. A globalized world, yet nationalism persists, even surges. Stateless nations still dream of borders, while diverse nations try to manage difference, and digital tribes emerge online.
The challenge seems to be finding a way to live with our local identities, our national loyalties, without letting them blind us to our shared global reality. How do we balance the tribe and the planet?
So thinking about the future, where is this all heading? Will the nation state as we know it even survive this century?
Well, you hear different arguments. One perspective is that, yes, nationalism might get even stronger.
As a reaction to all the change and uncertainty, people clinging to what feels familiar.
Sort of, yeah. Seeing the nation as an anchor in a turbulent world. Flags, borders, traditional identities feeling safer than global interconnectedness.
But there's another view, right? A move beyond the nation.
Exactly. The post-national perspective. The argument here is that our biggest problems, climate change, pandemics, economic instability, are global. They just don't respect borders.
So we need more global cooperation, maybe even forms of global governance to tackle them effectively. Less focus on individual nations, more on regional unions or global bodies.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But maybe the reality is more subtle. Perhaps a nation's survival isn't just about politics or economics.
What else is there?
Belief, a story. A nation ultimately exists because its people believe it exists, because they continue to tell themselves that shared story of belonging. Borders can change, governments can fall. But if that idea, that shared identity persists, the nation survives in some form.
Which loops right back to where we started. That idea is its strength.
And its potential Achilles heel.
Because if nationalism twists into obsession, into that drive for superiority and exclusion, it poisons the idea itself.
And history teaches us that systems built purely on dominance rarely last. They eventually crumble, often from within.
So if the idea dies,
then the nation dies too, even if the lines on the map stay the same for a while.
Wow. Okay, so maybe the question we should leave everyone mulling over is this. Looking ahead, centuries from now, how will people remember the nation? Will it be seen as this vital, proud shelter that protected identity and dignity?
Or will it be remembered as a powerful, maybe even beautiful, but ultimately temporary phase, an illusion we created on our longer journey as a species?
Something to definitely reflect on.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for walking us through all that. It's been incredibly insightful.
My pleasure. Lots to think about.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some new perspectives.